Welcome once again to CoRRECTalk, where we talk to different overseas Filipinos and overseas Filipino workers to help us understand the different political and economic systems in the countries where they are in. Today we talk to a Danish-Filipino couple, and here they are. Let's welcome them. Maayong adlaw, good day, magandang araw sa inyong dalawa. Thank you so much for giving me time to conduct this interview today. So I'd like you to introduce yourselves to our audience. Who would like to start?
You start.
Okay. So I'm Maria Corazon Cordero Jensen, a Filipino here in Denmark, and I've been here in Denmark since 2008, so around. And I am married to a Filipino-Danish guy, and I'm currently working, and also got my degree here in Denmark.
Yes, and we are so proud of our overseas Filipino workers and overseas Filipinos, okay, who have succeeded in other countries. Thank you, Cor. And yes, ikaw naman.
Yeah. As Cor mentioned, I am half Danish, half Filipino. Born and raised in the Philippines. Lived around Southeast Asia, but mostly in the Philippines. Studied in the Philippines, lived there, grew up. And then when I turned 18, I moved here to Denmark, and I've been living here ever since.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. So, Cor and Kristian, maraming mga bagay-bagay na dapat maintindihan ng ating mga kababayan. Especially now na napaka-successful ng ating hashtag campaign, which is hashtag #OustKiko. Many people realize na bulok ang sistema ng Pilipinas. So, panahon na para makuha ng maraming Pilipino, or we learn from our overseas Filipinos about the better systems na gumagana sa ibang bansa. So, I'd like to start with Kristian. Ano ba yung nangyari sa Denmark kung bakit napakayaman ng Denmark, tsaka parang walang problema ang mga tao na maghanap ng trabaho, di tulad dito. So, ano bang meron dyan?
Well, I can tell you what they don't have. They don't have any restrictions in their constitution against foreign investments. Many people, when they look at Denmark, they see Denmark is all rich and all that, fully developed. But it wasn't always like that. Denmark was actually a pretty dirt poor country back in the day. And in fact, about 200 years ago, the state went bankrupt. It got involved in the Napoleonic Wars, and it literally went bankrupt. It didn't have any money to pay anything. But then the country has started to rebuild itself, and it was very open to very business friendly. It started many big businesses went outside, overseas, and invested. They were involved in, for instance, laying out the telegraph cables across Asia, for instance. There was a big company that invested a lot in Thailand, and this was the one known as the East Asiatic Company, and export, import, and all that. Very open to business. And the same thing with Maersk. Maersk was their big competitor. Since then, the East Asiatic Company has gone bankrupt, right? So Maersk has pretty much taken over. But the point is, Denmark has been very open to businesses, innovation and all that. So we have Lego, for instance. That's a big innovation within the toy industry. And there's no restrictions to businesses. Cor, for instance, about when was it, 2-3 months ago, she even though Cor is a foreign citizen here in Denmark, she could start a business. She got it registered over the weekend, and then she was already a registered business owner. So a business-friendly environment was basically what built up this country.
Grabe, napakaiba sa Pilipinas. Sa pagkakaalam ko, kung magbukas ka ng negosyo dito, parang maraming gusto ng cut ng pera. Maraming gusto ng pampadulas. So, Cor, may na-experience ka ba ng mga Danish na nagsasabing magbigay ka ng pera dito or ganyan? What was the process of you opening the business in Denmark? Tapos, ikumpara natin yan sa process sa pag-open dito sa Pilipinas.
Yeah, by the way, entrepreneur pala ako dito. So, I just started a business. Tapos, yung processing ko is through online lang lahat. And then, napakadali, sabi ni Kristian, just over the weekend. But then, the thing is na yung business ko is food supplements. Tapos dito sa Denmark, kasi stricto kami when it comes to some food intake, something like that. Kung sa mga sapatos lang, damit, actually, pag mag-import ng sapatos, dito wala actually tax. Kung ano, for some minimum, may maximum sila na, na price ng sapatos. Tapos, walang tax yun, ganun. But anyway, purpose sa food supplements, I actually wanted to bring some food supplements from the Philippines. And then, yun ang medyo nagpadili sa business ko ngayon kasi kailangan kong isa-isahin yung ingredients. So, as what you asked me, your question is that kung meron bang bribery na nangyayari, actually, napaka-timing ng interview natin ito kasi it's just last week. I contacted with the food ministry. At tapos yung application ko is just only online. Sinend ko yung mga ingredients and then sinend ko Saturday and then they replied Tuesday, I think. So, kumbaga parang one working day lang nag-reply sila tapos sabi na, sorry, meron kang isang product na hindi pwede. Gumanon kasi merong isang ingredients na hindi pwede dito sa Denmark. So, tapos nagre-reply ako sa email tapos sabi nila, you can call if you want kung marami kang tanong. So, gano'n. So, I called. Tapos yung parang syempre, parang naramdaman siguro nila na panghinaan ako ng loob. Tapos sabi nila, kasi sabi ko, what about yung other products? Tapos sabi nila, wala sa amin yung mga ingredients. Don't worry, huwag kang mag-worry. Sabi niya, kasi ganyan talaga mag-start ng business. Huwag kang ma-discourage. Ganyan talaga mag-start ng business. Tapos lalo na food supplements. Sabi niya, tulungan ka namin as best as we can. But sabi niya, i-comply mo lang yung mga ingredients then para malaman namin kung pwede dito ibenta or hindi. Tapos yung parang alam mo yung nakakatuwa kasi tapos sinabi pa niya na kung hindi mo alam paano gawin, tumawag ka dito bukas kasi meron kaming student helper na makatulong sa iyo. So wala silang pampadulas para ma-approve na lang. Walang gano'n. Tapos napaka-nice kasi ang nakakatuwa kasi I tried to speak in English. Tapos nung tumawag ako, sabi ko, can we speak English? Tapos sabi niya, try mo lang mag-Danish muna, baka kaya mo din. Tapos yun, nag-Danish kami at wala akong narinig na pinapaulit-ulit niya yung sinasabi ko. So, ibig sabihin na iintindihan niya ako. So, yun ang kinakatuwa ko dito kasi even though mahirap akong magkuha ng permit, it's because it's food supplements. Pero, ko talaga na ini-encourage talaga nila ako na ma-push talaga yung negosyo ko.
They try to help.
Yeah.
We're not there for their sake, they're there for our sake. That kind of thing, yeah.
Napakabaliktad ng nangyayari sa Pilipinas. Parang sa video na yung isang Amerikano yata yun, na pinapaikot-ikot sa Bureau of Customs. Tapos, after that, I think he decided not to go through with the business. Dahil dyan, may lumalabas na mga posts ngayon dahil we successfully showed our netizens that foreign businesses actually are a big help to our country. Pero yung mga posts na lumalabas galing sa mga komunista, mga leftist, ito yung hindi nila nare-realize na ang foreign investor pala na nag-i-invest sa ibang bansa ay napakadali. Ano ba yung benefits na nakukuha ng Danish government galing sa mga foreign investors? Kahit entrepreneur na tulad ni Cor, ano ba yung benefits na maririp ng Danish government, Kristian?
Taxes.
Mm.
That's the obvious one. Because we pay some of the highest taxes here in Denmark, but we get also a lot of benefits for it, social benefits, welfare, and stuff like that. But of course, that doesn't pay for itself. Um, you need taxpayers to pay for all our social benefits here. So you need businesses, tax-paying businesses. You need people with jobs who are paying their income tax and all that. So when Cor starts a business, then the government is, they ka-ching, they say, another taxpayer. It's good for them.
And it's also teaching for them because I become more independent. Like for example, if I lose my job right now, I'm still working. If I lose my job and kung pinayagan nila akong mag-business, so kumbaga okay lang kung magwala yung trabaho ko kasi may negosyo ako. So I don't need to ask them for social benefits, di ba?
Exactly, but hindi
So,
ng mga Pilipino yan. Di ba? Ganda yan, may trabaho tsaka may business pa. Oh. Tapos, itong pinagtataka ng maraming Pilipino, or actually, marami talagang Pilipinong ignorante tungkol sa business, the whole business thing. Cor is starting a small business. Ma-consider ba yan as small business, di ba? Di ba, Cor?
Oo, trip-trip lang.
Oo. Sa Pilipinas, parang dadaan sa butas ng karayom ang mga Koreano, ang mga Japanese, para lang magbukas ng small business, magbebenta ng t-shirt, o magbebenta ng mga kung anong mga milk tea dyan. So, it's so different talaga sa Denmark, no? As what you've mentioned. Tapos, isa pa yung...
Sorry, i-add ko lang kasi I'm actually doing it at the same time. Sorry talaga diyan sa food ministry natin sa Bureau of Food and Drugs.
Yeah, BFAD.
Something like that. Kasi actually meron din ako diyan negosyo sa Pilipinas na gusto ko sanang magkaroon din ng yung cosmetics. Gusto ko magkaroon ng permit para ma-sell ko siya. Tapos enable na mabigyan nila ako ng permit, I have to pay 5,000 pesos para sa assessment. Dito, nung last week din, kasi sabi ko magtanong ako about sa payment. Kasi, tapos sabi ko, may bayad ba yung ginagawa nyo dito, yung pag-assess nyo sa, sa products ko. Sabi nila, don't think about it because dapat may certain amount, like for 50,000 kroners ang sales ko dapat before nila ako ipabayarin ng assessment.
Grabe.
So kumbaga, ang nakakatuwa kasi payagan muna nila akong mag-start if it works good. If not then kung as in wala talaga akong mawawala sa akin.
Grabe, ang layo. Yung sinabi mo na assessment sa Pilipinas, hindi pa yun sure, di ba? Kung aprobado ba or hindi.
Hindi sure pa papatok yung cosmetics ko. Di ba? Tapos, mag-capital na ako ng 5,000 pesos. Dito, sabi ko sa kanila, magbabayad na ba ako ng para sa assessment? Sabi na, depende yun sa sales mo in 1 year.
Grabe.
So, di ba? Kasi, encourage nila ako na itry mo muna. Tapos, kung hindi, edi walang mawawala sa iyo. Pero, nandito kami para magbigay ng assessment at permit. Yun nakakatuwa.
Parang, grabe yung business-friendly environment dyan sa Denmark. Yung sa Pilipinas, para silang may baygon katol yung business repellent policies sa mga kung ano-anong mga batas na ginagawa ng mga politiko natin. Tsaka, I'd like Kristian to respond to this recent attack on constitutional reforms, no? Grabe, amazing yung small business ini-encourage ng Danish government. Tapos dito sa Pilipinas, inaaway pa, pinapaalis pa, pinapauwi pa sa kanilang bansa, di ba? Grabe dito. Tsaka, Kristian, anong masasabi mo sa mga komunistang nagsisigaw na block all foreign investors tapos ibuhos yung lahat ng pera sa national industrialization? Bakit bad idea yan compared sa pag-welcome natin ng foreign investors?
It's a bad idea because it doesn't work. National industrialization requires a certain amount of discipline from the country. You sort of have to have a national discipline, which sadly the Philippines kind of lacks, which is understandable. I mean, the Philippines is composed of different ethnic groups and clans and rich and poor, different families, right? People's loyalties are not so much for the country, but more for their own families. It's understandable. So it's difficult to try and copy the national industrialization strategy that countries like Japan and Korea has. Japan, Korea, each of those two countries are homogeneous countries. They consist basically of just one ethnic group. So when they have a national plan, it's easier to have the whole country on board to pursue this national plan. The Philippines, unfortunately, doesn't have that. Plus, Japan and Korea also already has this Confucianist ideals, where they look up to the state as a sort of like they idolize the state. You don't really have that in the Philippines. Far from it, in fact. I mean, whatever the government tries to do, there's always a big faction somewhere in the Philippines who will say, "Oh, there's a lot of suspicion. There's no trust," and that's also one of the advantages here in Denmark. Also, Denmark is also homogeneous, and there's a hell of a lot of trust in this country. I mean, it completely blows my mind how much trust there is in this country. And I think I haven't been to Japan, but from what I hear, it's pretty much the same thing in Japan. There's a lot of trust in people. And when there's a lot of trust in people, that extends as well to the government. So when the government makes a national plan, they trust the government's plan, and they work together as one nation to pursue that plan. It's very difficult to do the same thing in the Philippines. So this national industrialization plan, it won't work in a country like the Philippines.
Do you think a system change in the Philippines can help at least start a feeling of trust between the citizens and the government? Is there a kind of system that we should adopt?
For one thing, if we're talking about trust with the government, we need a system where there's a high amount of accountability, so that you can easily identify and weed out untrustworthy politicians. We don't have that in the Philippines. You have the presidential system, so there's not a lot of accountability. If we had a system with a high amount of accountability, then it'll be easier to trust the government. That's one thing. That's the political trust. Then if we have an economic system where more people are uplifted into a higher economic status, people aren't so poor and desperate that they begin to steal from each other and all that, right? When there's a lot of crime and all that, it's also hard to trust. There's a lot of crime in the Philippines, so it's understandable that there's not a lot of trust in the Philippines. People live in gated communities, and when people walk with their backpacks, it's not a backpack, it's a front pack, they have. So there's not a lot of trust because of poverty. So if we had an economic system that will uplift people, then it's also easier to trust people in that way. So there'll be trust in the government because of the parliamentary system, and then trust in other people around you, because there won't be a lot of petty crime, pickpockets and whatnot.
And Cor, now that you have lived in Denmark for a very long time now, may nakikita ka pa bang mga lugmok sa kahirapan tulad ng sa Pilipinas, yung naninirahan sa ibabaw ng yung sa sementeryo, yung mga slum areas na ganyan? May nakikita ka bang ganyan sa Denmark? At saka kung meron man, Ano kaya yung cause ng mga ganyan? May mga poverty pa ba?
Actually, may mga homeless din dito and dati nung nag-school ako dito, trip din yung school ko. Tapos parang ano ko parang immersion ko yun sa Danish society na schooling for 6 months. But then I had a kumbaga direct conversation with homeless people. And then meron nga ito isang guy, I think he was from nakalimutan ko but he's also European. Na inilipat siya dito sa Denmark because of the war, something. So, nagkaroon siya actually ng standard as a Danish standard. I mean, Danish na talaga siya. Pero, kumbaga, naging homeless siya is because choice niya. Actually, may apartment siya. May bank account siya. Pero gusto niyang tumira sa street.
Yeah, being homeless here in Denmark is pretty much a choice. Some people like to live outdoors, and I don't know why.
Tapos, meron din iba, sabi niya, na meron din iba na European na hindi ko lang sabi kung saan galing, pero pumunta sila dito at tawag doon at hindi sila prepared, kaya hindi sila maka-afford magbayad ng bahay nila. Kaya naging homeless sila. Pero kumbaga, choice nila.
Yeah, because if they really wanted to, they could get help from the government. To get like a housing. It's in our constitution that everyone has a right to have a roof over their heads.
Yeah.
But some people don't want to. They're kind of like those people, and I'm talking about primarily Danish citizens who are homeless. They have a certain amount of pride, and this pride extends to the point where. They don't want to get social help from the government. I can handle this. I'm too proud. I'd rather live on the street than get money from the government and be dependent on them. That kind of thing.
So, choice dito. Tapos yung iba, yun nga, minsan nagkaroon na ng kulang lang sa papeles. Kaya this Christmas wala silang handa kasi nung hindi sila makakuha ng benefits from the government kasi may kulang sa papeles sila or may nagawa silang something sa past na hindi sila eligible sa ngayon.
Yeah. These are foreign citizens.
May Danish din.
But many of the people those street dwellers you see in Copenhagen, they're like from like Romania and stuff like gypsies and stuff like that.
So, but the environment around them would also at least encourage them to get a source of income, di ba? I'm sure hindi yan scarce sa environment nila. Yung job opportunities, baka may entrepreneurial opportunities ba? O tsaka ayaw lang talaga nila, yung ganun ba? May ganun din ba yung ayaw nila magtrabaho, ayaw nilang mag-entrepreneur? May ganun din bang tao na ganyan? Oh.
There are always lazy people here and there, and that applies to every country. And some people they just don't. They rather leech off the system. So yeah, but there's plenty of jobs to go around if you're not picky. If you're not picky, of course, if you're picky, then you'll have a hard time finding a job. I mean, you could be a university professor, and if you can't find a job as like a doctor or whatever. Right, you can always do food deliveries, for instance. Right? There's lots of we have a lot of foreign students here in Denmark, and because of their language handicap, they can't speak Danish. So they take on jobs that where there's no language requirement, like food delivery, pizza delivery and stuff like that. There's lots of that going around.
Well, actually, Tara, dito kasi sa Denmark, yung sabi ko nga, meron kami nga social benefits na makuha sa government. For example, kung ako, kung hindi na pagbubuhat ng upuan, ako may 3 years pa ako na eligible ako na makakuha ng work insurance, something. Unemployment insurance, 3 years yon. Actually, pwede akong magstay dito sa bahay for 3 years na walang ginagawa. Mas malaking kikitain ko kaysa nag-work ako ngayon 6 hours sa cleaning. Pero kaya lang, yun nga, parang syempre, yun nga sabi nga ni Kristian, kumbaga, dito ba parang proud ako sa sarili, may pride ako na parang, yun nga, minsan nga sa work nga sasabihan nila nga ako na, oh, nag-graduate ka na masteral ka, bakit ka pa rin naglilinis ng toilets? Ginaganon nila ako. Tapos yun, minsan binibiro ko sa kanila na, oh sige, magstay ako sa bahay, gagamitin ko tax mo ha. Yung ginaganon ko sila. Sabi ko, hindi ko kayang gamitin yung tax mo kasi sabi ko, hindi pa naman ako kompleto pa kamay ko, makapagtrabaho pa ako. Yung ganon. So, ikaw na lang mahihiya talaga sa gobyerno. Sa binibigay sa'yo ng gobyerno, ikaw na lang mahihiya.
Kabaligtaran niya dito ha. Tapos, I agree with you, Cor, kasi if we look at the Filipinos around the world, overseas Filipino workers or overseas Filipinos, yung nag-migrate na, nag-asawa na, nagpamilya na, I don't think may marami sa kanila na pumipili ng trabaho. Usually, yung na-encounter kunyari yung parents ko, nag-travel sila sa Amerika, yung na-encounter nila na nagwo-work sa mga hotel, hindi naman siguro masyadong picky. Basta kayang-kaya ang trabaho, tapos maganda yung sweldo, di ba? Gagawin talaga ng Pilipino yan. So, oo. So, let's go to yung minention mo, Cor. Maganda yun na yung gobyerno, there's a level of trust dahil na rin sa pinagbibigay ng gobyerno sa mga Danish citizens at yung mga taong nagtatrabaho within Denmark, no? May social benefits. So, dito sa Pilipinas, nakita mo naman, Kristian, no? Nagbabakbakan tayo sa mga leftist. Gusto nila libre ng university education. Gusto nila may unemployment insurance, yung gayang sinabi ni Cor. Gusto nila na may ilang araw ba yun na maternity leave, ganon, may libre, may lalabas na pera sa gobyerno, ganyan. Bakit ba nagagawa yan ng Denmark, tsaka hindi masyadong nagagawa yan ng Pilipinas? Ikaw, Kristian, what do you think?
It's because people here pay taxes, and people here have jobs, and these benefits, they don't pay for themselves. Someone has to pay for it. And it's paid for through taxes, through people that have jobs, businesses that can pay the taxes. So if you have, like in the Philippines, a very hostile business environment where there's not a lot of investors and not a lot of people that are paying taxes, and you also have a political system that's very corrupt, a lot of this money, what's little that's put into the state treasury gets sifted off, so there's not a lot left. The government will have a hard time paying for all this if there are no businesses and there's no way to ensure or to minimize corruption. So we have a here in Denmark that's very business friendly, as we've talked about, and a system of government that really minimizes corruption. I wouldn't say there's no corruption. There's corruption here and there. Like one of the big cases here, this is very recently. It's just been concluded, actually. There was this lady who was working for a social welfare office, and they found out, I think it was last year, that she has sort of like weeded a lot of money for herself, and we're talking about millions and millions of kroners, and people were wondering, how the hell did she do that? It's unfortunately one of our weaknesses here in Denmark. We have too much trust. We trusted her, so she just withdrew some money, put it in her bank account. No one discovered. She works at the welfare office. No one could do that. She did. Anyway, we found that out, and now she's in jail and all that. So corruption does exist here, but it's very, very, very minimal. So yeah, that's what the Philippines, a system where people pay their taxes and where taxes don't disappear through corruption.
Actually, Kristian, amateur lang yung corruption ninyo. Yung millions of kroners, wala yan sa Pilipinas. Sa Pilipinas, billions, tsaka trillions. Naging senador pa, di ba? Narinig ko lang yun, ha? Wala akong ebidensya, pero yun ang nangyayari sa Pilipinas. So, kung kung naaresto at saka na-imprison yung babae sa welfare ninyo or division na kumuha ng millions of kroners, bakit, yun mga kababayan ha, narinig nyo
Even a
na.
politician, she was just a lowly worker.
Oo nga eh.
And also, they found out she had an estate in South Africa, and then she owned many horses and all that. Like, where the hell did all that money come from?
Kaya nga nag-disconnect, di ba? San ba galing? Parang ganun. Dito sa Pilipinas, parang sabi nga ni Attorney Larry Gadon, bakit hindi nyo nakikita? Kasi may pera na kaganon sa mata, di ba? So, yun I think that falls under excuse me. I think that falls under accountability, Kristian, no? Kasi sige, may trust doon sa Denmark, pero bottom line, nahuli pa rin siya, 'di ba? Nahuli pa rin siya. Tsaka ngayon nasa prison na. So, ayun, which brings us to the political system of Denmark. So, our curious viewers are going to ask, what is the political system of Denmark? So, I think nakakaboto ka na ba, Cor? May idea ka ba kung ano yung political system dyan sa Denmark?
Yung nakaboto lang ako dito sa sa local elections lang.
Municipal
Elections. Tapos yun, mahabang listahan. Pero party lang yung inano ko, party lang yung binoto ko. Tapos yun, isang cross lang, tapos umalis na ako.
It takes 3 minutes.
Hindi ko nga kilala kung sino yung mga tao doon, pero ang reason ko noon, ang binoto ko yung party na yun is because nag-help sila sa Yolanda. Yun lang.
Oo. Pero may idea ka rin ba?
Hindi ko alam yung tsura nila. Boto sa ilan. Kasi yung iba dito, botohin nila yung mga pro-immigrants, mga ganon-ganon. Sa akin nung time na yun, narinig ko sa news na itong party na to nagpadala ng pera sa Yolanda. Ako, okay, ito yung botohin ko. Yun lang. Hindi ko alam sino ko yung pugi ba yung magaganda sila o matanda o bata.
Walang sayo-sayo. Wala kang nakitang mga budots dyan, di ba? Sayo-sayo.
Wala.
Okay.
Wala, hindi ko malala kung sino yung leader nila, forma nila, basta yung ginawa na lang nila yung inisip ko, yung party, so the whole party mismo.
Ayun, yun ang gusto natin eh. So, Kristian, paki-explain, ano ba yung form of government ng Denmark from national level, tsaka kahit dyan sa municipal level din, pakibigay ng a little bit of background.
At the national level, we have Denmark is a constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary democracy. So that means we have a monarch. Currently, it's a queen, and she's basically a ceremonial head of state. And the one who actually runs the country is our prime minister. And the prime minister is elected from amongst the members of parliament. So basically, we have a multi-party democracy. So there are many parties. There's not one single party that can hold the majority. So they have to form coalitions. They have to negotiate amongst themselves and figure out who among the group can form government. And then they elect among themselves who is going to be the prime minister. So they take that what they have negotiated to the queen, and the queen says, okay, it's just a formality. I'll say, okay, you're prime minister. Then the prime minister governs the country. At the local level, we have actually 3 different forms of local government systems here, but it's all parliamentary in a way. Basically, if I can take Copenhagen as an example, we have a municipal council, and then they elect among themselves 7 mayors. So Copenhagen doesn't have one mayor. Copenhagen has 7 mayors, and each mayor is responsible for a specific department within the administration of Copenhagen. So like a department. Sorry?
Para siyang cabinet, parang team.
Yeah, it's like a cabinet. But each mayor is responsible for a different department. Like one department for the park services, one department for school services and stuff like that. And the mayor who is responsible for the finances is the de facto Lord Mayor, because he has the power of the purse. He gets to decide where the money goes and all that. So he would be the mayor of financial affairs, would be called the Lord Mayor. So yeah, that's the system we have in Copenhagen, and that's the predominant system among all the municipalities here in Denmark. There are other systems in place. I'm not really too well familiar with that, but our neighboring municipality in Frederiksberg, they have a system that's even more like the parliamentary system, because they have a mayor who's elected from amongst the council, and he's the one who delegates the department heads. So they only have one mayor in Frederiksberg municipality, whereas in Copenhagen municipality we have 7 mayors, and one of them is called the Lord Mayor because he's the head of the financial department.
So,
yeah.
Disconnect yung ina-accuse ng mga anti-reform Christian, no? When we are promoting the parliamentary system, sinasabi nila na yung parliamentary system is a form of government that consolidates power into one person. Yung sinasabi mo ngayon, napakalayo. So, sige, go.
Yeah, it's not true. A parliamentary system is a system where you have a group of people making decisions together as one body. And then, of course, then they elect a head of government, but he's responsible to this collective body of people's representatives. So he doesn't get to decide whatever he wants to do. He has to always consult the assembly, or whatever it's called, parliament or the municipal council. He always has to consult what this group of people want. He cannot just do a one-man show like is the case in a presidential democracy. In a presidential democracy, you have basically one man running the show, and he's the boss. He has department heads who are responsible only to this one man. Whereas in a parliamentary system, you have department heads who are responsible to the entire group sitting in parliament. And they can vote these people out anytime they want if they're not satisfied, whether of corruption or incompetence or whatever. Whereas the department heads in a presidential democracy, they only answer to the president or the mayor if it's a local government.
So in that case, Christian, we can say that the parliamentary system, especially the ones being used in Denmark, they have a higher accountability because they are accountable to more people.
That's why very low level of corruption.
Ayun. Okay. So mga kababayan, yan ang sistema na sinusulong ng Correct Movement, na magkaroon tayo ng parliamentary system para naman meron tayong mga tools, mga kasangkapan na to combat corruption, to combat those mga pulpul na politiko na ganyan. At saka there's a hot topic right now, Christian, about the term limits. Can you tell us if there are term limits in Denmark right now?
There's none. We don't have term limits. There's no need for term limits because term limits basically only exist in presidential democracies precisely because it doesn't have an effective accountability mechanism. So it's very hard to get rid of corrupt and incompetent and stupid people. So as a stopgap solution, as a mitigator, presidential democracies typically have term limits to sort of like cut off, if in case one of these people are incompetent, at least they can cut them off by term limits. That's not necessary in a parliamentary democracy, because if someone is incompetent, he's be pulled out immediately. So there's no need for term limits.
O ayun na mga kababayan, ha, narinig nyo na walang kwenta yung term limits na yan pag nagbago tayo ng sistema. Huwag kayong maniwala sa mga sinungaling dyan na naggumagawa ng mga propaganda tungkol sa constitutional reforms. And now going to ugali ng Pilipino, Cor, I'd like to ask you, ano bang mensahe mo sa mga Pilipinong nagsasabing hindi talaga magbabago ang mga Pilipino kahit palitan pa ang sistema o kahit maghikayat pa tayo na disiplinahin ang lahat ng Pilipino, hindi na talaga, wala na talagang pag-asa. Do you agree with that statement o may pag-asa pa ba tayo as a country to get our shit together? What do you think, Cor?
Ito na lang yung isipin ng mga Pilipino, kung wala tayong pag-asa na magbago, 'di ba? Bakit maraming Pilipino nasa abroad? Kasi yung mga Pilipino na nasa abroad, sila yung nag-a-adjust kung ano yung kultura at ano yung sistema sa abroad. So, ibig sabihin, kung kaming 10 million na Pilipino abroad, kung kaya naming mag-adjust sa kultura nila doon, kaya din natin lahat dyan sa Pilipinas mag-adjust sa bagong sistema. No, which is like, for example, pag ma-open yung economics, so iba-ibang lahi ang mag-i-invest, makaka-adjust tayo kung ano yung bagong pamamaraan ng pagtrabaho, kung anong bagong pamamaraan sa pagpunta sa trabaho. Kayang-kaya, pero kailangan lang natin maging open at maging matapang.
Oo.
Kasi yun din kaming OFW, naging matapang kami sa pagsakay namin sa eroplano papunta sa bansa na papunta namin. Wala kaming kakilala, iba lingwahe doon, pero naging matapang kami. So kung kaya nating maging matapang sa ibang bansa, pwede din tayo maging matapang sa sarili nating bansa.
Ayun, tumpak! Ang daming snowflake kahit walang winter sa Pilipinas. Maraming snowflake sa Pilipinas na natatakot sa kung ano-anong bagay. So, napakaganda ng mensahe mo, Cor, and I really hope that this video is going to be shared all over the Philippines para hindi na tayo matakot sa kung ano ng pagbabago na dapat nating gawin sa Pilipinas. Yun kasi yung fear-mongering, yung ito maganda, baka hindi kasi Pilipino tayo, tsaka kangkong we are used to kangkong, so we should eat kangkong. Parang ganun yung iniisip nila. Tsaka, let's go to Kristian. Yes.
May pag-asa pa tayo na maging okay yung bansa natin. Huwag tayong matakot sa mga foreign investors. Kaya na nga natin makipagbubugan nga sa basketball court. Yan pa kaya. So,
Oo, makakapal. Kaya nga ni Pacquiao magtutukan sa di ba? Sa mga Mexicano tsaka yung ibang lahi.
Kaya natin.
Oo, kaya natin. Tsaka Kristian, your final message to our dear kababayans na actually kawawa tayo kasi we are constantly being manipulated by the mass media, those people out there. What is your message to our kababayans regarding system change and also why this is important?
Well, I really hope that we get these reforms pushed through. I mean, it's the only hope for the Philippines. I've been around. I've looked at other countries, and I'm happen to be living in a functional country, and you kind of get inspired seeing what works here, and me being half Danish, half Filipino, and growing up in the Philippines. After living here for 20 odd years, I really wish what I experience here is something that Filipinos could also experience, and I know it's possible. You talked about could Filipinos adjust? I can see it. I can see Filipinos are able to adjust. We go to Jollibee in Milan, for instance. The discipline among Filipinos there in the Jollibee there. It's customary here in Europe. After you've eaten your food, you put your tray away yourself. You don't have what do you call those? Those people that clear a busboy. There's no busboy there. You do it yourself. That's normal here in Europe. And Filipinos there, Jollibee there in Milan, they do that themselves. Because that's what people here do. And that's because there's a system in place. There are trash bins available. When we go to Jollibee in the Philippines, there are no trash bins available. So people leave their shit on the table, right? And instead, the system is where they have a busboy to take the stuff, right? And it's all about the system. So if you just adjust the system, people will start adjusting their behavior. So of course, it's possible, but it requires that we change the system first. Otherwise, nothing will happen. We can, there's a lot of people who say, oh, you got to vote for the right people and all that, voter education and all that. It's not going to work unless we change the system first. That's alpha omega. That's the first thing you have to do. Change the system.
Ayun, mga kababayan, narinig nyo na ha. Wala yung mga self-discipline na haka-haka na sinasabi nyo. Kailangan talaga ng pagbabago ng kapaligiran kasi yung kapaligiran natin ay pinapatakbo ng sistema. Kaya naman mga kababayan, sana naman ay tumulong na kayo sa kilusan ng pagbabago sa konstitusyon. At saka ngayon, our time is up and together, let's shout, correct the Constitution. 1, 2, 3, go!
Correct the Constitution!